Welcome to Lesson 7 of Advanced Saxophone Lessons Made Easy. Putting it all together. Creating music. Congratulations! You are now armed with many new skills and are the best technical saxophone player in your school, perhaps even in your state. But how can you be even better? This final lesson on playing the saxophone will teach you to move from simply playing notes to creating music. The ability to play all the correct notes with the correct rhythm is important. However, musical expression is an art form and involves much more. The goal is to connect with your listeners on an emotional level. This can be achieved through proper use of dynamics, phrasing, vibrato, and energy. Encourage your audience to experience a variety of emotions such as calm and excitement. Creating music instead of only playing the notes on the page will make your practice, audition, and performance more enjoyable for you as well as those who hear you. Don't be afraid. We all experience performance anxiety at some point in our lives. Being a musician, performing in front of a group of any size can be a nerve-wracking experience. Over the years, I have learned 2 effective ways to cope with this: eating a banana about 30 minutes before a performance and using visualization techniques. In all seriousness, bananas contain beta blockers that can help reduce anxiety. One visualization technique I recommend using when you practice is to close your eyes and imagine a place that makes you feel relaxed and happy. For me, it is standing on the beach with sand between my toes, looking out over the vast ocean. For you, it may be standing on top of a mountain on a clear day when you can see for miles and miles. Whatever gives you the feeling of peace and tranquility. Be sure to be detailed and make it as real as possible. Doing this will calm your nerves and remove tension from your fingers and shoulders, allowing you to play more freely and with better control. This is an especially great exercise to use when you're playing scales or music you have memorized, which allows you to close your eyes and focus only on being calm and relaxed while practicing. I also recommend taking a few minutes before a performance to sit or stand quietly with your eyes closed, focusing on steady breathing and visualizing your so-called happy place. This can do wonders for your nerves when you're standing in front of a large audience and you feel they are all waiting for you to hit a wrong note. Now, how to practice. We have all been told we need to practice more. You probably even have a certain amount of time you are required to practice each day. As a saxophone performance major at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, I was expected to practice a minimum of 3 hours every day. On occasion, I was able to achieve 5 hours of practice, and sometimes even surpass that. From private instructors to band directors, we like to throw around the mantra, practice makes perfect. Musicians who know better will say, perfect practice makes perfect. While it is great to put in many hours of practice in the practice room, if you are not sure what you should be practicing, and therefore not accomplishing anything, you are wasting time. In contrast, if you have a game plan before you start practicing and stick to it, you will maximize your practice time and improve your skills each and every time you take your horn out of the case. Every person is different, and everyone learns at a different pace. Because of this, there is no set way to practice that is going to be effective for every student. The approaches presented here are what works best for me. You may need to make a few adjustments so they will also work well for you. The most effective way to begin is to be sure, before you open your case, that you are ready to practice. Find a place you can go by yourself with no distractions. The best scenario is to have a designated practice room that is used only for that purpose for that specific amount of time. Eliminating distractions will ensure you have the focus needed to be productive. All that is required is a music stand, a chair or bench to rest your case on, and a chair if you prefer to sit. I recommend standing since it allows you to play with greater air support as you are not compressing your diaphragm. Once you are in your practice room, take a moment to breathe. Do the breathing exercises discussed in Lesson 2. This will encourage your breathing to be relaxed, strong, and ready to play. The first thing I do after putting my horn together is play long tones. I start on middle G and play whole notes down to low B flat. During this time, I am focusing on air support, articulation, and intonation. Yes, saxophonists can play in tune. I then move on to simple warm-up exercises. You will want to warm up your fingers on both hands as well as play in multiple registers, low to high. We already discussed several exercises for this in Lesson 4, but here are a few of my other favorite warm-up exercises to get my fingers moving. I begin warming up with long tones to focus on my breathing. Then I work on loosening up my fingers and my tongue so I'll be ready to play fast. Here is how I play the second and third exercises on the page. You may want to practice these a bit slower at first and gradually build up your speed. Once your fingers are loose and ready, take a look at what you want to accomplish. Do you need to memorize new scales? Are you trying to figure out a jazz lick? Are you working on a classical piece and have trouble getting past a difficult section? What are you practicing for? We will discuss how to develop practice sheets to work out difficult sections or licks shortly. First, let's talk about learning scales. How many of you love to practice scales? Neither do I. So why not make them more interesting, fun, and easier to learn? How do we do that? Change your focus from learning notes of a scale to developing another skill. Take articulation, for instance. Instead of playing all of your scales slurred or tongued, change it up. Practice alternating tongue, slur, or tongue, slur, slur, tongue, slur, slur, as if playing triplets. Be creative in finding different ways to practice scales. As you do this, you will be amazed how quickly you learn and can move on to something even more fun and rewarding. Here's a tip: never stop practicing scales, no matter how well you believe you can play them. Scales are the foundation of all music. Each piece of music in some way uses scales to add a flashy run that can potentially be very difficult if you are not familiar with a particular scale. I recommend that at the beginning of every practice session, while you are warming up and getting focused, you play through a few scales to get your fingers ready for those flashy licks. That said, let's forge ahead. What to practice? When encountering a difficult piece of music, many people make the mistake of trying to play it all the way through at the marked tempo over and over again until they get it right. Well, I have bad news for you. It will take a very long time, if ever, to get it right with that approach. Even if you slow the tempo down a little, you are most likely practicing bad habits that will only make it more difficult as the tempo is increased. The most effective approach I have found when faced with a difficult piece of music is to isolate the problem areas and focus only on those. I recommend getting a piece of manuscript paper and writing these problem areas down. Then put away the piece of music for a time and practice only with your written out practice sheet. How exactly should you write out the difficult sections? In groups of no more than 2 or 3 measures at a time. Take a look at part of my practice sheet for the Creston Sonata. Notice that I have written groups of 2 to 4 beats. The time signature is of little importance at this point. Also, notice the repeat signs at the end of each measure. This way, in my mind, it is just another sheet of exercises I am working on. I practice each set several times in a continuous loop. Start slowly and gradually build speed, playing with a metronome each step of the way. It also helps to use the same approach discussed earlier while learning scales. Change the articulation and have fun with it. Again, this will help you take your mind off of the notes and focus on the music. Each time you practice 2 or 3 sections, go back and put them together. If you cannot play them when connected together, make the 2 notes before and after this section a new set and work on that. Use only the practice sheet for about a week. Then take out the piece of music again and play it through slowly. If you are still having trouble with the same areas, go back to the practice sheet. If there are other areas that are now giving you trouble, write those down in a similar fashion and repeat the process. I guarantee that if you embrace and apply this technique, there will not be many pieces you cannot learn in a matter of days instead of weeks or months. Now let's talk about sight reading. When picking up a piece of music for the first time, a good rule of thumb is to scan it and make mental notes of the composer's intentions. Look for tempo markings, how fast or how slow, dynamics, how loud, how soft, crescendos and decrescendos, and any indication of style or feel, such as lively. If you have a sight reading test during an audition, you can do this rather quickly. And if the markings are followed, and even exaggerated, it will be an added bonus in the eyes of the judges. The last step before you begin to play is to quickly scan the piece for passages that appear to cause difficulty. These may be 16th or 32nd notes, and even rhythms that may prove challenging. Take a moment to work them out and sing them in your mind. Without playing, move your fingers on the saxophone along with your singing or humming. When you are not trying to quickly prepare for a sight reading test, take your time and use a pencil to mark important areas you need to be aware of while playing. Marking in pen is not recommended. An eraser is one of a musician's best friends. Circle key changes, dynamic changes, tempo changes, etc. If they pop out on the page, you are more likely to notice them as you play through the music. Now that you are aware of the markings and are prepared to abide by them, begin to think about the flow of the music. Each section of music is connected by phrases, usually in groups of 4 or 8 measures. Identify the phrases and plan how you are going to take a breath between phrases instead of in the middle of a phrase, as well as how you can play in such a way as to smoothly connect the phrase. It is also good practice to mark where you intend to take a breath. Nothing disturbs a good phrase like poorly chosen and abrupt stops for a breath. As you play through the music, you will learn where a good spot for a breath is and where it is not. If you have difficulty making it to the next phrase without taking a breath, find a place where you can sneak in a quick breath without breaking up the movement of the phrase. Another consideration for phrases is how you connect them. Referring back to the lesson on vibrato, when you have phrases connected by whole or half notes, push through the phrase with a bit of crescendo and increased vibrato speed. This will keep the music flowing and maintains the interest of your audience. To mark this so you will remember, I recommend drawing a right arrow or crescendo moving into the next phrase where you feel it is appropriate. I also like to mark when an alternate fingering is needed, such as a bis B-flat key or a side F-sharp key. Take a look at my notes for the second movement of the Creston Sonata. This may seem like a bit much, but when in the middle of a performance, you'll be glad you did and not be concerned with forgetting what you spent so much time practicing. Now let's talk about doing our homework. For players who are serious about performing at the highest level and are willing to invest in extra preparation time, I recommend doing your homework. Researching the composer and learning about what they may have been experiencing when writing the music is a great way to gain even more of an advantage over your competition. This will provide you with an understanding of how the music is intended to be performed, as well as learning what instrument the piece was originally written for. As an example, one of my performances included a sonata written by Camille Saint-Saëns. From a quick web search, I found that the composer passed away in 1921, the same year the sonata was written. Since it was written near the end of his life, as you listen to recordings, you get a sense that he was thinking a lot about his life and his pending death. The slow movements are grave and sound like the sadness or fear he may have been feeling. There's also a happy movement where he may have been remembering a time of great joy. I also noticed right away that this sonata was originally written for clarinet, which has a much more mellow and silky tone than a saxophone typically does. With these insights, while performing the piece, I tried to imagine how the composer may have felt. I tried to imitate the sound of a clarinet and exaggerate the sadness and happiness of the music throughout the different movements. As a result, many years after the performance, I met someone who was in the audience and they talked about how moved they were while hearing me perform that piece. Making performances memorable should be an ambition of all musicians. Another example is my preparation and performance of the Bach cello suites that I played on the baritone sax. My approach to performing this wonderful collection was to listen to as many cello players perform it as possible. For almost any piece, you can look for available recordings on the web or ask around and borrow recordings if necessary. Following along in the music and making stylistic notes helped me determine the best qualities from each performer that I wanted to imitate during my performance. Such stylistic notes included placing more emphasis on the first note of a set, elongating the space between certain notes, adding fast vibrato to a targeted high note, adding a ritardando in order to enhance the emotion of a phrase, and so on and so forth. In order to best represent the work of a composer, we need to understand the music we are playing and make every effort to honor the original intent of the composer. Taking the extra time to do this will make your performance one that audiences will remember with great fondness, leaving them anxious to hear more.